All right, so back in today on our altcoin show, we're going to dive in deep to a lot of tokens for you. We'll take a look at Bitcoin, ETH, all that good stuff. It's going to be fun. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today is Evan Aldo coming back into the studio. Good to have you.
It was always great to be on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So, Evan, a couple of things happening right now in the space. And of course, if you look at the macro side of things, the debt ceiling is one of the biggest issues. Over to a tweet here from Financial Times. Washington is basically trying to avert this debt default. And the debt default is a fairly significant thing. But for me, I look at this and I think there's no way that the U.S. is going to default on its debt. It's just a matter of posturing.
Of course, yeah.
It's a matter of, one side or the other trying to do a little bit of negotiation, putting some pressure out there. But in the long term, I think this is just going to be, it's a pissing match, unfortunately. The other problem is how this plays out in the bond market and what we might see even in the treasury bill side of things.
Right.
So, playing all that. Now, with that, what happens to things around Bitcoin? What happens to things around Ethereum and the rest of the risk market that we look at today? Bitcoin price levels are threatening to lose the 27 support. We saw a little bit of that over this week. Evan, when you look at the current situation on Bitcoin, what are you liking or not liking right now about Bitcoin's price action?
The first thing I'll tell you guys about is the debt ceiling. The last time they raised it was obviously 2011, and the S&P 500 crashed down about 20% because of that. Bitcoin in 2011, if you guys were around back then, crashed. I'm not even going to say how much it was. It was a lot, but now we're in better times.
Yeah.
If the S&P 500, I'll show you on my chart, if the S&P, let's say it repeats 2011, S&P 500 crashes about 20%. Bitcoin theoretically probably could come down even a little bit more than that. We do have some big points. 40% down from where we are right now would be a double bottom at around 16, 17. Again, I don't know if you're just going to crash down that quickly, but if we're talking about black swan events, if we're talking about stuff happening, it's probably going to happen now. And if you're looking at, back here, what happened, money flow coming out, this was around 2020. Last time we had money flow coming out on the 2-week here, this deep with the VWAP coming down as well, you did come down about 57% for COVID. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying you could see something, of a gradual decline down for the next couple months for a summer lull. And if we go on some of our lower time frames, and by the way, I think this is a great DCA period just as long as we stay in the red here, similar to this area for the next 8 months into the end of the year. So prime real estate to get into Bitcoin right now, I still think, even if we do crash down. But if you look at our lower time frames here on the daily, first thing that comes to mind here is one, we have the head and shoulders here. You got a technical target right around this spiral end pocket at 24.2. You also know there's going to be a ton of liquidation points, probably at the high 24s, and I think price is going to come right down to get those out. Here's one trajectory. Money flow could come down deeper on the daily as well. Also, your EMAs turning gray. The last time they turned from the opposite, gray to bright, was all the way back here in January, and obviously we pumped up almost 100% in that amount of time. So, I don't know if we're going to crash down 50%, but you could easily come down to 24 into the end of May, a typical sell in May, walk away type thing. So that's kind of how I'm playing the market right now. Overall, pretty bearish. Let me just show you the last thing here. We are testing right now the volume area low at about 27. So that's going to be an important point. If we can keep that, that's going to show some bullish strength. But if we reject from here, that's not a good sign. I'm looking for a potential short if we could get a bearish div potentially on the 10-minute and lose this area.
Yeah, I think the scenario that plays out on this, and the one problem that has been the center of this has been the scenario around that 27 mark, which has really put a lot of pressure on Bitcoin as a whole. The only thing I look at is, again, long-term sentiment. We've seen a little bit of a downside across. I look at the overall here. You can kind of see just quickly on Ethereum running in on the gold, Bitcoin in the orange. Bitcoin's been somewhat flat, but here recently, last two reports and prints, getting ready to print today again with a down sentiment trend.
Right.
And again, coming off of its little bit of a recovery high over the last 30 days around 30K. That being the case, if you look at some of the points that they were highlighting in this article, there was one analyst that looks at this one area around the 23K mark, and then back in this pocket around the $20,000 mark. Do you feel like that is a possibility? Now, a lot of people look at May as a real critical date, the sell-in may go away kind of process, but things are so different now because of the macro.
Right.
Playing in this, what would you say is your low target right now on Bitcoin?
For May, for this month, my low target is going to be that place I mentioned. Let's go back and show you guys. Huge place. Every time you have a double spider line pocket right here, around 24 is big. After that, you do have this point at about 22, which is huge. After that, 20K is really big. That's going to be a huge point. I don't think you'll see, if you do see those low points, unless there's like a black swan, something crazy happens, I don't think you'll see those points until later summer, end of summer. And what I also want to show you in terms of, this is the total crypto market cap other than Bitcoin and Ethereum. This is just all altcoins. Look at the last time this happened where you had this little trigger wave right here back. This was the pandemic. I don't know if it's going to be that bad. You crashed down about 57%. You're getting a blood diamond right now. I know like some people might like to make fun of the blood diamond, but you have a technical target out of this kind of parallel channel here at about $190 billion market cap. So substantially, we could come down quite a bit on Total 3 for just the most amazing altcoin buying opportunity in just like a few months. Probably August is where I'm really looking at. And people are going to be shocked about how bullish I am on the market then.
Interesting. All right, because that we've been talking about that is later in the fall, possibly the potential of those being buying zones for a lot of the altcoins stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to cover a few of those for you guys today. Let's jump over to ETH. ETH price prediction now with volume and volatility is diving. As you just saw on the power index data, again, sentiment on ETH continuing to decline. The real question is whether or not sentiment is going to hold on that. If you look at the charts on Ethereum, it's also looking a little dreadful there as well. What are you showing? Yeah,
looking pretty bad overall on this chart. I mean, you've got the head and shoulders up here. Your technical target is at about 1475 right now. You have the spiral line about 1530. I do think if Bitcoin comes down to 24K about, you definitely will see this area. You can map it out right here. This is May 30th, which, it could take some time. That's what we're looking at, but I do think it's very likely into May. If it's not May, sometime in June, sometime in the summer, you probably will see a pullback to these areas potentially on Ethereum. And if we do go to the higher timeframes, this is pretty wild what I want to show you right here. It looks very shockingly similar. Look at where I circled right here with this anchor wave. So if we zoom in here, this was July of 2019 at the peak of that mini bull run, I guess in 2019, that recovery run. Money flow at the same area, red dot at the same area.
Yeah.
And let's map out what we did right there. I'm not going to count the pandemic because that was a black swan, and I think ETH is going to hold up better than it did last time, but there is a strong case to be made for a lower low. I think it's less likely you'd come down to 600 like I've been saying before, but I still think those areas are in the cards, especially with regulatory FUD, especially with how the altcoin market as a whole looks right now. So I do think Ethereum can come down substantially and continue to bleed against Bitcoin in the coming months.
And it's been slowly tracking down on sentiment over the entire month. If you go back at the overall on this, ETH started the month on back here middle of April, right there at around 68, one of the highest recordings on sentiment. And the big scenario was right here around the 25th, where ETH intersected what was happening with Bitcoin. Bitcoin kind of took the reins. ETH continued to slide under Bitcoin, and then of course, but still overperforming general overall market, with exception to what's happened here in this last week, which has been a pretty significant slide on sentiment. So that's another concern. If you guys are not checking out our CPI, make sure and use the link down below for access to that. Let's go over to what's happening in the other altcoins that will be affected. Of course, Apple is doing their Worldwide Developer Conference here in June. With that, there's been a few narratives that are starting to leak out and move into this. One of the narratives that's going in this direction is Axie. And of course, Axie went up and popped off pretty nicely, but Origins is now past review on Apple, but it's only available in some a very few countries, so don't get super excited. It's not available in the United States. So that in itself, I think, but the good thing here is that Apple's opening up to a Web3 game, and that might show some potential signs here. The other aspect of this is it gets into the idea of how Axie and other games like that may or may not make it into all of what they're doing into the augmented reality headsets, which could be a big game changer. Here was Jiho talking about this from Axie. Axie open on the iPhone, Origins past review. introduced a little bit to thousands of people now, 65% of the time there. Feels good. You can use the NFT on Axes. We believe this will be the first time Apple has agreed to allow an externally purchased NFT to be used on an app store. So it's going to be a soft launch, a lot of work to be done, but good news. I think this is at least a movement in the right direction from Apple's standpoint. Now, with that being the case, there's a lot of tokens that kind of fall into that group. Some of them on the gaming token side, Gala is going to be a player here, Decentral most likely.
Right.
They're going to start to shine a little bit. I want to do you have Gala on yours?
I can get it up real quick. Yeah.
Let's pull that, because we've had some people ask about that. I'd love to just kind of take a quick look at that. Because it's been, if you look at the Metaverse, I'll go down here to the Metaverse and gaming overall. This actually took a bit of a jump up here over the last couple of days, and all the way back up to a 50-22, which is a little bit unusual for Metaverse to see that kind of sharp incline. Obviously, this kind of scenario playing into it could cause a little bit of that. What's Gala showing over there?
Gala right now, obviously, if you look at this chart, it looks a little depressing by a lot of means. You had your 98% drop down. That's usually the lowest anything could go down and still survive and come back, as from what I've seen. Right now, you're currently down about 96%. You do have the blood diamond back here, but what you may see, and this may be what I'm waiting for to potentially get into this. Gala, I definitely am probably going to put a small position in when the time is right. Axie as well, because of this news. What I'm looking for is a potential bullish div here on Market Cypher on the weekly as this VWAP comes up and crosses zero line. This could happen maybe in June, July, August, some type of area like that. So I'm waiting a little bit more just to make sure, we don't come back down to form a double bottom. I think, though, we are in a lot of thin ice here. I'd be more inclined to give Axie a shot than this one. I'd be a little bit more confident with Axie, because if this does make a lower low, the odds of coming back from that, beyond a 98% correction here, if you are to, come down to 1 cent, that's very low that something's ever come down 99% and recovered from that area. So I would wait ultimately for altcoins. The thing I'm looking at is I think this is going to be more of a sell the news type thing for a lot of these altcoins. Let me just show you on my chart here on Bitcoin dominance. We're almost at that area that we were right here. If we see a significant pullback in the market, Bitcoin to 22K, ETH to 1500 or even below, see what happened here in July of 2019. You had that big jump up for Bitcoin dominance, and this led to the top of Bitcoin dominance right here. And then this red dot over here was the key place to get into, start DCAing into altcoins, to get into altcoins. If we break out of this channel here and then get up to, I don't think we're going to get up this high to like 60, but I think you could get up to around 54, 53%, and then get this red dot over here that may print with the very gapped RSIs on Bitcoin dominance. That's going to be the key rare place to potentially get into altcoins and make life-changing wealth in the next bull run.
Yeah, so the top 5 gainers there were Axie coming in at 13% over the last 24. Gala jumped 12.5. Mana grew, Decentral, grew 9%, and then Render rose 6.6. Again, Render's been up around this number a couple of times, around the $2 mark. You guys know we love Render here on this network, and it's one that I just think, from a technology standpoint, it's got a lot of opportunity in future. What does the chart show, though? Can that sustain itself, or are we going to look at another dip on Render?
I mean, most likely what I'm seeing, when you look at Total 3, like I showed you with the blood diamond, that looks, like it will come down a lot in the next few months. But after that happens, if we're looking right here in Render, you got a double top pattern after you came up. I mean, let's just be real here. Let's see how much you came up from this bottom. 800%. You're getting that bearish div. I think Render has a lot of good capabilities. I think you're probably at least going to come down to retest, $1.30 at some point. Most likely you would even have a more substantial correction down to maybe 70-something cents, maybe over a 50% correction here. This could be what we can map out here is this money flow coming down maybe June, July, just a few more months. I would just wait just a few more months and then potentially get in. My sweet spot, I think, the way I've been mapping out for a lot of these altcoins, August, September, after you see that big drop down. And I think that's where a lot of apathy sets in. That's where a lot of people give up on these altcoins, maybe more regulatory FUD after the debt ceiling is raised. That's the time to get into a lot of these. So we're very close, I think, just a few more months to start DCAing into these.
Render's been on a little, I was looking at our chart, and it's been on a pretty good rise coming out of that. If you look back here, May 11th, that gain, let's see what that was.
The suckers rally.
So a little 21%. So again, but if you were looking at render on entry points, because if that's kind of the issue with render is if you're looking at a long-term hold, if you're going to go into this in the long term, I mean, these kinds of variations are going to be smaller, especially when you look at some of the things that are actually happening. This was come from my the Altcoin Hero Twitter account. Apple's newest mixed reality headset scheduled for release on June. Pay attention to Render, according to the CEO of Render. We've showed this before where Jules has got in there, but they actually have been working with Apple on not only the silicon hardware, but what might be going into the AR headset. So if that gets into activity of Render starting to go in that direction, this is going to be interesting.
It's really long-term, really bullish, but I think it's going to, based on what I'm looking at, I think it's going to be sell the news at first, but then an excellent place to get in later summer towards the end of the year.
The Metaverse Index also took a big pump on this news. And again, I think overall this just opens up the potential for Web3 gaming. So some big spikes right here. And additionally, if you look at some things out there, we'll get into the SEC here in a second with XRP. But I think in general right now, Metaverse tokens, if you're looking at this, do you feel like Metaverse tokens are a play currently, or back to your point, still waiting into August before we go after
Based on everything I'm looking at, I'm still just focusing my DCA right now on Bitcoin. I'm going to be starting to start converting some of my Bitcoin over to Ethereum. Right on this chart, let me just show you real quick, 2 seconds. Right as this comes into the red for this about 8-month period right here, I think we're going to repeat something like that. And as we come down, this is going to be prime real estate for Ethereum. At that same time, or maybe a few months after, probably August, and when this Bitcoin dominance finally breaks up to around the mid-50s here, that's when I'm going to start getting into altcoins. So I'm just giving it a few more months to get into altcoins.
All right, well, speaking of another altcoin, that's going to be XRP. And XRP had some big news out just this last 24 hours. The SEC can't seal documents. Let me zoom in on that for you guys a little bit. Related to the landmark 2018 Hinman speech. This is the one that everybody's talked about. We've talked about for a year and a half, it feels like. But at least the ruling came down. The federal judge overseeing the Ripple lawsuit ruled on Tuesday, and this is not going to be able to be sealed in the case. So again, it's another win for Ripple in general. Again, I think what we're looking at here, and if you talk to John Dean, we probably should have him back on the show. John, if you're listening, I'll reach out. But the issue is going to be when that starts to circle back around. When you look at XRP right now, are you doing anything with XRP?
Not yet, but there could be a good opportunity coming up. I just want to point this out first. This is wild. So look at this trajectory, what happened from September 2018 all the way until June of 2019. If you take the same trajectory, look at where we are. That's the exact same thing.
That's funny.
And then look at what happened, Paul, right here, 76% down to the pandemic dump. Now, I don't think it's going to be that bad, but if let's just not count the pandemic here, take this potential trajectory downward, that would be hitting into some major support around 20 cents. I know some the XRP fans don't like this, but if you do see the debt ceiling raised, potential going into a recession, regulatory FUD, maybe some more bad news. We've had some good news with the case, maybe some bad things come out. You come down to 20 cents, you touch 20 cents in a few months for an excellent buying opportunity. Also, what we could look at in market cipher B, where I circled here, pretty similar with gapped RSIs and the higher red dot here on the weekly. We're like in a simulation how similar this is to 2019.
So crazy.
So, from a TA standpoint, I have to give this a few months and see what happens.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think a lot of people that follow us on the channel, there's quite a few XRP fans out there right now. It's a little bit more difficult to get to, but again, it gets back to the point of if it gets listed, TA is going to be off the charts because the scenario of just the buzz alone of it going back on an exchange will go, So at that point, it's going to be an interesting. Let us know. Drop some comments down below and make sure and smash the like button because it is one of the ways. Do you like these altcoin shows where we break down various tokens and give you guys some insights on where we're going? We are going to do a portfolio show. I know that it's been some time coming, but the real scenario has been we kind of locked and loaded on a handful of tokens and have been waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah.
That opportunity, I think, is getting ready to come. And
we're
getting close. So maybe a portfolio show is in order because we are coiling up to make some big potential moves here. Remember, recessions cause and create some of the best wealth out there. So a big deal. Litecoin pumps ahead of its halving event. The question is whether Litecoin can hit $100 again. We're in the 90s right now. So this is a token also that we're going to put into the CPI. So what are your liking or disliking on Litecoin?
So, full disclaimer, I'm not the biggest fan of Litecoin. It's been a big underperformer.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah. Been a big underperformer in the last bull run. Its market cap is high. I mean, I think there's just so many opportunities and other things. The same I could say about XRP as well. But, look at what happened back here in August of 2019. You had the red dot on the 3-week, kind of at the same level. Money flow starting to come down. That was a 65% drop down if you don't count the pandemic. Look at how similar, in even this bull run to that, you came down and then you repeated that and then you came back up here. And then it looks like, unless we get a major curveball, you're probably going to do something along these lines and come down to a significant amount in the next few months. Also, if we look at kind of the weekly here, this is even like more similar to 2019. Look at kind of the pattern here with the gapped RSIs. And then as they started to come down, that was it back there in 2019. The same thing is kind of happening here. I do see with the VWAP coming up, there could be a little bit of potential, as you mentioned, to hit 100. I think if it does hit 100, that's a really good place to look to short, but I wouldn't bet too much on this hitting 100. Yeah. I do think, I think it's going to be a good opportunity in the next few months. Just what I've been telling people. I have a big cash stack on the sidelines. I'm planning on going pretty heavy into altcoins. Come August, come September, I think that's going to be the major opportunity. The last thing here is, look right here. This was a good place to get into Litecoin in July of 2020 when it came back into the red here in market cipher B. We're almost there, maybe just another month. So keep an eye on that.
Could be an opening for Litecoin for sure.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, we want your help on tokens that we're going to bring into the CPI. As you guys know, we've delisted a handful of tokens, not in a negative way. Sometimes there's just not enough data for us to pull an accurate, especially in these bull markets. So what we do is we pull those tokens off the CPI until we start to see traction. Most of these have been in the gaming and metaverse side. But if you look at the chart here, this is just showing just in general, obviously the big, high cap altcoins holding in there. But I'd love to get your input on what to add into the CPI for this next bull cycle. Some of the things, of course, you guys see Gala, Axie, Sandbox, all in the green right now, Mana, Engine, Arweave still in there, Flow is in there, Render, Ape, Theta, Sushi and Chili's is in there. We also have Veracity, Audius, Stacks is still in there. We've had Aptos in there and pulled it out. Blur has been in and out. Red Fox has been in and out. There's a handful of others that are coming in and out. So I'd love to get your feedback. Drop some comments down below. We'd love to hear that. Let's get over to the poll, and then we'll get to some questions, I think. Let's see what we got. Okay, will Apple reveal its mixed reality headset? Yes, it'll be amazing. Everybody's loving that one. Not even close. 26, that's the next one. I think, this is going to be an interesting race between Apple and Facebook, because whoever really wins this and opens this up to Web3 gaming, this could be a very intriguing technological shift forward.
I mean, Apple's headset's probably going to be a little bit better, but it's going to be a lot more pricey.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Couple of questions. Let's see here. What do we got? Stay away from Engine. They're not doing much. I think that's been the case right now. People are shilling Pepe in the comments, going in there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What do we got here? All right. Apple, will content have 30%? Most likely, Jen, that's going to happen. Can't believe how much Apple VR is set to be listed at retail-wise. I think that's just going to be a scenario, back to your point. Everdome is up 30%. That's interesting. We were tracking that in the last time. T-Bird says Bear 24,365.
Not until August. Until August. Once we get to August, September, I got a big cash stack.
Everybody's always picking on you. Yeah. Illuvium and Sandbox. Sandbox. We're out of both those tokens. I still like Sandbox. Illuvium's been back and forth on my list of whether or not to go in that direction. I just haven't seen the impression to me from a gaming standpoint, and we'll talk about this on Metaverse Insider. Probably should do that with Kyle to get into some of the gaming tokens, but I just don't know if it's one that I would go with right now. Anyway, if you guys are not part of the Diamond Circle, jump in. It's real simple. Grab the link down below and you can join. You get additional podcasts, additional content, sometimes more research. All happens over there in the Diamond Circle. If, of course, you want to reach me, it's out there on Twitter, @Paul Burns. Don't forget,